over at BangTheBook.com. We are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Updated NBA power ratings from Noops over there this morning. Very good stuff there in that article, as always. We've got a preview of tonight's Colgate and Boston University game. I wrote that up here this morning. We got a Kings and Bucks preview from Admir Algic. We'll have daily NHL picks from Parker Michaels. We got a lot of stuff going on over at the website. Daily NBA picks from Chris Wassel as well. So much going on over at BangTheBook.com. Make sure you head on over there, check it all out. And also, too, while you're over there, we've got a new sportsbook section over at BangTheBook.com where you can make some picks. It's an ad-based system, so you actually get to play with real money, but you don't have to put up any real money. It's a bet-for-free thing over at BangTheBook.com. Check that out over in our picks section. Again, you get free 10 cents to your account. You get to play with that. Then, of course, you can watch ads to get new deposits out into your account. So, really interesting thing, kind of hard to explain here on the show today, but head on over there, check that out, read through the how-to section. There's also a little YouTube video that'll show you how to get set up, how to get involved. So, really cool feature over at BangTheBook.com. We're very happy to have that. So, head on over there and check out that picks section. I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun over there. Finally, as you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio, presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB and the number 200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. And obviously, still, no matter what time of the year it is, you want to be out there shopping around for the best prices, for the best lines, for the best odds. So head on over to DSI, but also while you're over at BangTheBook.com, playing around in that free sportsbook area, check out our sportsbook reviews. We've got the top books that take Bitcoin deposits. A lot of good stuff over there for you to check out at the website right now. All right, so I want to take a look here at some season win total stuff, and there's obviously a lot that goes into this process. And, you know, again, maybe season win totals aren't your market, but I think a lot of these concepts do have a lot of carryover impact to some of the different sports that are out there, win totals in different markets, stuff like that. So I really like to spend a lot of time on this. And, you know, obviously I'm putting together that MLB betting guide, which that'll come out here probably early to mid next week. I'm going through, got about 5 first drafts to finish up here, then go through the editing process, update with some of the transactions that have been done. So that MLB betting guide, probably looking at about 8 to 10 days or so before I get that out to everybody, but very much looking forward to that. Going to have the individual team preview write-ups over at BangTheBook.com to go along with all the different player and team futures stuff. Then we're also going to put together a PDF. So if you want to download that to a reading device, something like that, or you just want to have it all in one place, we'll be putting together a PDF for you as well. But again, I spent a lot of time on this, getting ready for the season. Helps me organize my thoughts, helps me look on an individual player level, stuff like that. I think there's a lot of good information in this MLB betting guide, but I did want to take some time here today while I've got this first segment to talk about, you know, how I evaluate what happened in the past, how I carry that forward to the next season here. And, you know, a lot happens over 162 games. There's no question about that. So what you want to take a look at here is how did the team get to its actual final record? You know, if they were a bad team, were they consistently bad? Were they a sub 500 team over 7 months throughout the course of the season? Were they a consistently good team? You know, were they very, very good for long stretches of time? Were they consistently posting winning months? Were they a team that had one bad month? Were they a team that had one good month? You know, you want to sort of take away some of the outliers in some of these instances where, you know, maybe a team just, something went wrong, there was some sort of major injury, something like that, and they had a really bad month. Well, that's probably not who they are. If they had one really good month, well, maybe that was their ceiling, but maybe that's not a sustained level of play for that specific team. And one great example of this, one that I took advantage of with a season win total bet for the 2019 season, was the San Francisco Giants. In 2018, the Giants went 5-21 in the month of September. So they really quit on the season ultimately. They did have some injury considerations, stuff like that, but they kind of quit on the season. They were a 68-68 team through 136 games. But 5-21 over those last 26 games, all of a sudden they go 73-89. Was this really an 89 loss team? No, not really. I don't think so. What happened with their season win total? Well, for the 2019 season, it came out at 73.5. So this was a team that was playing on an 81 win pace for the majority of the season, had a bad September, kind of quit on the year, and their season win total comes out 73.5. That was the wrong kind of adjustment because this was a 500 team throughout most of the year. And yeah, maybe they don't go 500 in September. Maybe they don't go 13-13. But even if they find a way, to go 10-16 here, they wind up winning 78 games. And 10-16, obviously not a great stretch, but they would have won 78 games. So their season win total comes out at 73.5. They went over that during the 2019 season on September 18th. So they had plenty of time to spare. That wound up being one of my favorite National League season win total picks last year. And again, it was an overreaction to what we just saw. The Giants were not a 5-21 caliber team over the course of the season, just over the final month of the season, because they quit, because there were injuries, so on and so forth. So the market overreacted to that small stretch, and we wound up with an easy winner going over 73.5. So as I look for a couple of those teams here this season, and again, this isn't to say these are going to be plays, but just to say that there can be some overreaction to what we just saw. The Los Angeles Angels, through their first 110 games, they were 56-54. That was going into the month of August. And as we know, very difficult season for them. They had the death of Tyler Skaggs. They had a lot of pitching injuries. And, of course, losing Skaggs took away a lot of the depth that they had. So this team, over the final 52 games, went 16-36. Now, were they that bad of a team? Maybe. I thought they overachieved most of the season. I thought they were a very flawed team over the course of the year. But now they've got Anthony Rendon. They've made some other transactions. They've got some more pitching depth. So this is a team that was on pace last year to go 82-80. But instead, they went 72-90. So that big swing over the last 2 months where Mike Trout was hurt and they had a significant lack of depth, well, that kind of shaped the narrative of their season. Now, of course, they signed Anthony Rendon, so their season win total up quite a bit higher than it would have been otherwise. But these are the kinds of things you want to look at here. Are the Angels closer to a 500 team, or are they closer to a team that finished with 72 wins? I think even though I had a lot of problems with that team last year, they're still closer to a 500 team. Well, now they get Anthony Rendon. Now they get some more pitching depth. Now their season win total in the mid-80s. So you want to evaluate this team as if last year they were a 500 team. Now they made their additions. Now they added to that lineup. Maybe they get some better health from Tommy La Stella, Justin Upton, guys like that. Maybe they are more of an 85, 86 win team. That's where the win total is. So again, people are going to look at this and say, well, they won 72 games last year. Yeah, they got Rendon. Yeah, they got some pitching upgrades. But how are they going to win 13 or 14 more games? Well, to me, I think that's the wrong way to look at it because they played like a 500 team over the majority of the season before circumstances kind of got in the way. So, again, you really want to look back and see how these teams played over the majority of the season. Try to find those outliers. And I think the best one here that we can take a look at is the Chicago Cubs. The Chicago Cubs last year on September 16th won their 5th game in a row to improve to 82-68. During that 5-game winning streak to improve to 82-68, they won by 6, 10, 13, 9, and 3. They were winning some games in big fashion, but they finished the year 2-10. They wound up going 84-78. So this is a team that was 14 games over 500 with 12 games left to play. And they went 2-10 and finished 6 games over 500. So should that impact their season win total going into the next season? Did they just quit on Joe Madden? Also, in that span where they went 2-10, that started with a 2-run loss and then 5 consecutive 1-run losses. So that took them from being very much in the wild card race and even in the division race as well to not being in either one of them. So what does that mean? Is that who the Cubs are? I don't think so. I think the Cubs are more of that 82-68 team. It was a bad streak at a bad time. If you go 2-10 in the middle of the season, it sucks, but it doesn't necessarily define how your season ends up. For the Cubs, it seemed like they sort of, that sort of defined their season, going 2-10 over their last 12 games. They wound up falling well off the pace in the Central, fell short of the playoffs. I don't think that's who this team is. And also, too, to the Cubs, look, with their personnel, they should never go 84-78. But they did. And then, in the offseason, they didn't do anything. So there's a very low, very negative perception right now of the Chicago Cubs. But if this is a team that goes, 6-6 over its final 12 games, they go 88-74, it looks a lot different, doesn't it? A 4-game difference over their last 12 games really changes the complexion of their season. So those are things that you want to take a look at here. The Cubs are being evaluated as this 84-78 team that didn't do anything over the winter. Maybe they didn't need to do anything. Maybe that last 12-game stretch doesn't define who they are as a team. Maybe the 82-68 record over their first 150 games defines who they are as a team. So as you're going through and as you're looking at futures prices, season win total stuff, all those kinds of things, look at the context of the season for these teams. Look at the Washington Nationals, 19-31 in their first 50 games. Then they go on and win the World Series as the wild card team. Are they a 19-31 team? No, absolutely not. But are they as good as they were over the last 4 months of the season? That's probably not the case either. So again, you want to look at the context of the season and sort of see how these teams kind of played over the long haul. Were there any big lulls? If there were, was somebody hurt? Something like that. The St. Louis Cardinals are a prime example. Jack Flaherty with a simply elite second half. And the Cardinals wound up playing a whole lot better, as you would expect, with Jack Flaherty posting an ERA under 1 in the second half of the season. But what are the Cardinals? Who are the Cardinals? At the All-Star break, they were 44-44. And then Jack Flaherty just completely took over, was phenomenal in the second half. Some of the other guys got a little bit better in the second half. The bullpen got better in the second half. What are the Cardinals? Are they really a team that goes from 44-44 at the All-Star break to what they did after it? I think they were, 47-24 after the break, something like that. Is that who they are? Probably not. So these things are very important with the carryover to the next season, in particular with teams that don't make a lot of transactions. And of course, the teams that did make some transactions, evaluate what that means to them. Evaluate what that means to last season's body of work, then carry it over to this season's body of work. And we can also do that with some of these adjusted standings metrics that are out there. Pythagorean win-loss is one that's very, very common, very, very popular. Pythagorean win-loss is a run differential-based standings metric. To me, I like using it over the course of a season to isolate regression to the mean. Because what you get a lot of times is some teams do really, really well in one-run games. Some teams lose a lot of blowouts. Or vice versa. Maybe some teams win a lot of blowouts, but don't have a lot of success in those one-run games. And all of that impacts your run differential. All of that impacts your Pythagorean win-loss. So, for example, a few teams to keep an eye on from last season, the Milwaukee Brewers. The Milwaukee Brewers were +8 in Pythagorean win-loss. They were +3 in run differential last season. So by run differential, they looked like a 500 team. But overall, they finished 89-73. In part because they were very good in one-run games at 27-18. So they played very well in those close games. That defined their season. That gave them 89 wins. Does that regress going into the next year? The Braves and the Giants. The San Francisco Giants last year The San Francisco Giants last year, 38-16 in one-run games. It was the best record in baseball by a large margin. The Braves, 28-16 in one-run games. So when you're very good in one-run games and you win a lot of these close games, it can negatively impact your Pythagorean win-loss, because what you're seeing is that they're winning a lot of close games, and run differential-based standings metrics like Pythagorean win-loss kind of look for negative regression with that. On the flip side here, the Cubs, like I just mentioned, -6 in Pythagorean win-loss. They were 19-27 in one-run games. And like we just talked about, they were 2-10 over their last 12 games. So their Pythagorean win-loss was severely impacted. Well, their actual win-loss record, I should say, was severely impacted by what happened at the tail end of the season. So they were a better team than what their record would suggest. And that's what Pythagorean win-loss is telling us. And also that 2-10 stretch at the end of the year. The Baltimore Orioles, -6 in Pythagorean win-loss. They were 11-22 in one-run games. So they were awful in those toss-up types of games. And when you're already a very bad team, if you can't win about half of your one-run games, that's going to hurt you quite a bit. The Royals and the Reds were both -5. The Reds were 24-33 in one-run games. They played a lot of them. But the Reds, they're a big outlier in base runs and Pythagorean win-loss, because over the course of the year, they played like a 500 or better team. They just didn't win enough one-run games. They finished the year 75-87, even though up until the last week of the season, they were about a 500 team based on Pythagorean win-loss, based on their run differential. So the Reds are a team that you look for positive regression from, and they also had a very, very good offseason. So the Reds, I mentioned this before, one of my favorite season win total over bets, because A, they were not a 75-win team last year, and B, they added on to a team that should have been, 82-80, 83-79, something like that. Their season win total over, one that I really liked here going into the course of the season. Again, like I said, one-run games tend to regress year over year, and my handicapping style is regression analysis based in Major League Baseball. I try to look for degrees of regression. You'll see signs of, that team should have done better at one-run games, but maybe their bullpen is bad. Maybe their bullpen just isn't very good and they can't win those types of games. So, they should get better, but maybe they won't. Other teams have a pretty decent bullpen and maybe just didn't fare well in one-run games for one reason or another. Maybe the offense just wasn't clutch. Maybe the offense didn't score in those high-leverage situations. Well, that can negatively impact your record, negatively impact your record in one-run games. So you want to try to look at the context of why teams were bad in one-run games, or why teams were good in one-run games. Another standings metric I like to take a look at here is base runs. This is over at Fangraphs under the standings heading. Then you go to base runs. I like to look at this because base runs takes all of the individual outcomes, offensively and defensively, puts them together in a context-neutral environment, and then spits out a run differential. At that point, the run differential goes into a Pythagorean win-loss formula, and then we get an expected record for that team relative to base runs. Now, what is base runs? What is a context-neutral environment? Let's say that we've got these 6 outcomes in these 2 very different orders. Let's say a team comes up to the plate and goes strikeout, strikeout, single, single, home run, strikeout. That is 3 runs scored. You get 2 singles with 2 outs, a 3-run homer, and then a strikeout that ends the inning. That's 3 runs. Same 6 outcomes in a different order. Home run, single, single, strikeout, strikeout, strikeout. That's 1 run. So essentially what base runs does is it takes those 6 outcomes, puts them together in the hopper, and spits out a run differential. How many expected runs would you get in that situation? Then when it spits out that run differential in that context-neutral environment, it puts together a record based on Pythagorean win-loss. So it takes all of those offensive outcomes, comes up with a runs scored per game figure, takes all those individual outcomes when your team is pitching, comes up with a runs allowed figure, and then with that run differential, puts together an expected record. So basically what this is looking to do is it's looking to isolate bad luck and isolate that concept of cluster luck that I mentioned before that Joe Pita talks about in trading bases, where some teams are just very good in high leverage situations with runners in scoring position. Other teams are not. There's no year-to-year correlation in terms of performance with runners in scoring position. Good hitters will be good hitters all the time. Bad hitters will be bad hitters most of the time. So the good teams generally do better with runners in scoring position because they simply have better hitters. But there's no correlation year to year. If a team is first in runners in scoring position, offense, that doesn't mean they're going to be first the following year. So you try to isolate this, try to find some of these teams that overachieved or some of these teams that negatively, performed. And then you try to take advantage of that in the season win total market. So, for example, the Reds, once again, if you put all of their outcomes together, offensively and defensively, they played more like an 84 and 78 team. It was unfortunate timing with the offense. Base runs projected the Reds to score 4.51 runs per game. They actually scored 4.33 runs per game. So that could make a substantial difference, especially when we circle back and see that the Reds were 24 and 33 in one-run games. So if they have some of those better outcomes in close games, maybe that changes everything. Maybe they would have had lesser outcomes in blowouts, but they would have won those games anyway. If you take away 2 runs from a 10-run win, add them to a 1-run loss, all of a sudden that looks a whole lot different, doesn't it? So that's kind of what base runs is looking to achieve a little bit there. Another one here, the Tigers, who were awful last season, as we all know, but they were -7 in base runs. They scored 3.61 runs per game. According to the base runs formula with that context neutral environment, they should have scored 3.94 runs per game. Now for the Tigers, that's a difference of 0.33 runs per game. Over a 162 game season, that's over 53 more runs that they should have scored. But because of the timing of some of their outcomes, they were held down offensively. The Red Sox and the Cubs were a couple teams at -5. Again, the Yankees, right? The Yankees were +9 in base runs. According to the formula, they should have scored 5.6 runs per game. They actually scored 5.82 runs per game. Now, they should have allowed 4.77 runs per game, but they actually allowed 4.56 runs per game. So again, they should have scored 5.6 runs per game. They actually scored 5.82 runs per game. So that's a difference of 0.22 runs per game. You multiply that by 162, the Yankees, according to base runs, should have scored about 36 fewer runs over the course of the season. Again, they should have allowed 4.77 runs, but they actually allowed 4.56. That's a difference of 0.21 runs per game. Times 162, that's 34 runs per game, or runs per season more that they should have allowed. So we're talking about a Yankees team that should have scored about 36 fewer runs over the course of the season and should have allowed about 34 more runs over the course of the season. So you start talking about taking runs away and adding runs for the other team, and it makes a big difference. If it happens in a 10-run game, it doesn't matter. If it happens in a 1-run game, it matters a lot. So that's what this base runs formula is trying to accomplish here. The Rangers are another team that they were -68 in run differential, should have been -103 in run differential. And again, we don't know where those 35 runs come in. If they come in 1-run games, all of a sudden the Rangers are losing a lot more of those close games. If they come in games that they lost by 1 run, they lose by more. but they still wind up losing those games. So you don't necessarily know when it's going to happen with base runs, but what this all means is that you're trying to find teams that overperform or underperform. Whether it was good luck or bad luck, whether it was just timing, whatever the case may be, you try to find some of these things and then you capitalize on them from a season win total standpoint. The Brewers, for example, like I just mentioned, they were +3 in run differential last year. They played a lot more like a 500 team. But as we look at base runs, they should have scored 45 more runs for the season given the outcomes that they had. So what that tells me is that the Brewers probably struggled with runners in scoring position. And if that's the case, there's no guarantee that that happens this year. So base runs suggests that they should have been a little bit lower than where they were, but with a better record than just straight up Pythagorean win-loss. So all of this stuff goes under consideration. And I know I'm spending a lot of time here on the season win total markets and all that, but these are large scale, larger sample size examples of concepts that I try to look at over the course of the season, not just with baseball, but with a lot of sports. Because run differential, goal differential, point differential, these things matter. Records in close games, these things matter. We've been talking about that with Brad Powers with regards to college basketball. Teams that are winning or losing a lot of close games, that can have a regression to the mean effect as we go forward. And maybe it never happens, and that's when you lose money. Maybe it never happens, but a lot of times it will. But you want to look at the context of why this is happening. The Brewers have a good bullpen. They're going to have a good bullpen. So maybe I don't expect as much of that negative regression from them. The Rangers, I don't think they have a very good bullpen. So maybe I would expect more negative regression out of a team like that. So those are things that you want to look at. That's kind of the framework that works for me, the things that make sense for me. And again, sometimes these are skewed by a team quitting at the end of the season like the Cubs did, like the Giants did 2 years ago. That's what you have to look into. That's what you have to find out. And I talk about a lot of that stuff in my MLB betting guide. So I'm very much looking forward to releasing that sometime probably mid to late next week. Hoping to get that out there. A lot of promotion to be coming up for that MLB betting guide as well. But again, very important information for you to keep an eye on and take a look at out there for not just Major League Baseball, but for all of the sports as well. We transition over to the college basketball side here. We've got a handicapping the hardwood segment with Kyle Hunter of HunterSportsPicks.com and also BettorSportsPicks.com. We took a look at a handful of regression candidates here. Also a look at a few games coming up here for this week as we try to get Kyle back in the swing of things here on the program. So here is that version of handicapping the hardwood with professional handicapper Kyle Hunter of HunterSportsPicks.com. Good to chat with Kyle there, and certainly we continue to wish him the best as he recovers from a very painful procedure there. But coming up on our Tuesday edition of Bang the Book Radio, we'll chat with Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. We'll talk about the first weekend of the XFL. We'll talk some NHL stuff, and then obviously take a look at this week's golf event. And we'll take a look at the Daytona 500 with Brian, who will be kind of our jack of all trades type of guy. We'll talk some NASCAR with him over the course of the season. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.